Saturday. Welcome to Eastside Parkways Radio, where we join guests locally and on a national level to talk about possibilities and what we want out of a restored Humboldt Parkway in this Queen City Forward project. My name's India Walton, and I am joined by Eddie and, as always, Miss Grant, and by Stephen Rosenthal. Today we have a very special guest. We're going to be joined this morning by Joe Driscoll, a Syracuse native who's lived this fight from multiple angles. He started out as a musician touring all over the world, but when he came back home, he got into grassroots organizing with the Sanders campaign, and then got elected to the Syracuse Common Council. While in office, he worked on everything from the city's lead crisis to clean energy, but most importantly for this conversation, he chairs the transportation and became the leading voice in pushing for the I-81 community grid. Now he serves as Syracuse's I-81 project director, right in the middle of redesigning what that future actually looks like. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, India, thanks so much for having me. Excited to join the conversation.
Thanks for taking the time.
And Joe, welcome to Buffalo. Eddie here.
Yeah, love it. I'm a big Buffalo fan, man. I love spending time up there. Love your city.
Love to hear that.
Hey, Joe, Betty Jean Grant. I'm here doing the Facebook video, so if you want to see or hear yourself after the show, just come to Betty Jean Grant Facebook page, okay?
I will. I'll check it out.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, the I-81, exactly what is I-81? Because a lot of people in Buffalo might not know.
We're going to get right into that. So, Joe, tell people in Buffalo what I-81 is, what it has meant to the history of Syracuse, and sort of give us some grounding in how that whole movement came about.
Yes, absolutely. So I-81 is the primary highway that runs right through the heart of the center of the city in Syracuse. It was constructed, it's a very typical American tale. I know Buffalo has its struggles with highways, and I've been up to Rochester. And so it's kind of a similar tale that a lot of American cities have. They were building this highway. The path of least resistance for them was, they really just raised the entire African-American and Jewish neighborhood that was called the 15th Ward, demolishing, I believe, they displaced about 1,300 families and destroyed about 500 businesses in order to make way for the highway. And that was, the effects of that are still deeply felt in Syracuse today. The neighborhood that's right next to the highway still has some of the highest concentration of, racially and economically segregated neighborhoods. And so, this has really defined a lot of Syracuse's character and a lot of the problems that we still deal with today. So a lot of the folks were displaced to build this highway, and, the impacts are still felt. That corridor, some of the housing currently right now is about 7 feet from the highway. So folks are experiencing the second highest levels of heart disease and asthma in the state. So most people, the name of the project there is Pioneer Homes, and most of the people there, if not a member of their family, everybody has a story about someone with asthma or respiratory problems in that corridor. So in 2019, the state decided, for about a decade, we had a decade-long fight in Syracuse about what we were going to do with this highway, whether to build it back wider and taller and take down more buildings and expand the footprint, or to take it to grade level, take it down, take the elevated highway down to street level. And in 2019, the state decided they were going to go with that option called the community grid option.
Yeah. And Joe, can you give us a timeline of when the highway was put in place and how long it took for your voices to be heard and for this to be taken seriously? Because here in Buffalo, we're dealing with the same thing, especially with the health of the community.
Yes. Yeah, so the highway was built end of the 50s, early 60s. And, it stayed until, I believe the movement to tear it down started kind of late 90s, early 2000s. And it's always interesting, with Buffalo, with Rochester, and there's a great podcast, I don't know if you guys have listened to, called The Big Dig about Boston's battle, how these projects take place over the course of decades, rather than years. But the movement to get rid of the highway started in the early 2000s. A great Syracuse leader, Van Robinson, who was the first African American president of the Common Council, really led the charge and started calling for its removal in about 2001. And it's been kind of crazy in Syracuse because from that, the movement started picking up traction. I'd say probably 2008, 9, 10, and there was a very coordinated effort by suburban leaders, by elected officials, to prevent the community grid. There was a well-organized, well-funded group called Save 81 that was really fighting back against the community activists. And so give a shout-out to NYCLU, the New York Civil Liberties Union, that did a great job organizing the community, working with all the grassroots organizations. And we started a grassroots group called the Community for the Grid that was built around supporting the community grid option. And then the timeline was, from that movement starting in probably 2008, 9 was when the movement started picking up steam. It really came to a head in 2017. 2018, and then the state made their announcement that they were going to go with it in 2019, and then construction started in 2023.
Nice. So I want to talk a little bit more about what the community grid option means, because that's a term that we haven't really used ourselves or is not really a part of the vocabulary that we use. So I understand that I-81 is a raised highway, whereas the Humboldt Expressway is dug. So we've been using restore the parkway, fill it in. But what does it mean to have a community grid?
Yeah, so every one of these projects is unique. Rochester's was some depressed, some elevated. It was a mix of two. In Syracuse, we have this elevated highway 81. From just south of the city to just north of the city, it's all elevated, about 20 feet above the street level. And it provides, people are going 55, 65, that whole corridor with no stops. And so the real pushback from the suburbs was, the traffic counts are about 70,000 vehicles a day, which is a lot higher than a lot of the other highway removals that have happened. It's a well-used intersection. So the concept of the community grid was basically people were saying, where are all these vehicles going to go if you take it to street level? Like how can this, how can we move this traffic from the south to the north? And so the community grid became a plan from New York State, from New York State DOT to basically say, we are going to distribute all this traffic throughout the community grid so that all the streets become part of the grid network, and we figure out new routes to move the traffic. So that's when, DOT was the one who coined that phrase of the community grid option. So basically dispersing traffic at street level roads rather than trying to just have it all funneled on one elevated highway.
I'm glad that we're having this conversation with you, because the narratives are so parallel. Like, they're so similar. Like, we're hearing similar numbers, right? Like, how are we going to move 70,000 cars a day? And, we're saying, like, well, the traffic can be put on the radios. And I'm happy to hear from you that the Department of Transportation can find alternatives to highways. And I think that if that's happening in Syracuse, then it gives us a lot of encouragement. We cite the I-81 project all the time. We actually brought Lanessa down to tell us more about it and to help us out with some options, to be able to get a fresh start. But to hear that you got an option that included returning traffic to streets in, like, that came from the Department of Transportation is really encouraging to me, because, people we're kind of thinking maybe they're telling us that we're going back to the drawing board, but they have their plan. They're just trying to convince us. But if they can do it for Syracuse, I don't see why they can't do it for Buffalo. One thing that I find interesting also is the involvement of elected officials. I mean, yourself and your council president. Why do you think that there was a difference there? Like, was there public pressure to get them involved, or do you think that was something that was an independent choice? Because we've not seen any sort of involvement or support from our elected officials, and not even involvement or support, just like a position either way, aside from the majority leader, Crystal Peoples-Stokes, who was about to retire. So it's going to be like sort of a rudderless ship, especially when we depend on the leadership of our elected officials to kind of steer projects like this in such a heavy way. So what happened in Syracuse that made more electeds want to get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that's a lot of where the rubber met the road and where this kind of thing really happened. In 2017, there were some, state level races for assembly and state senate. There was a mayor's race in Syracuse, and that was really it. I think we had a group called Uplift Syracuse. We had folks like Lanessa. There was a lot of different advocate groups. There's a group called CNY Solidarity. All these groups really got actively involved in electoral politics. So there was, I'd say the state senator's race, at the time it was Dave Valesky, who was working with the Republicans. He would caucus with the Republicans in the state Senate. And he got primaried from a very progressive woman on the left, Senator Rachel May. And I think, in my estimation, there was the issue that he was caucusing with Republicans, but I think, a big issue in that race was her making it about the community grid option. And in the mayor's race, it was very much like, our mayor, Ben Walsh, was very vocal, during the campaign that, like, if he was elected mayor, he was going to make sure that the community grid happened. So I think, we always talk about that. I started, you talked about my history as a musician. Like, I started as an advocate, when I was a musician still. And I think it's always important. Like, I think the best things happen when the outside game meets the inside game. When, like, when the advocates and the folks with the placards and the folks demanding stuff are like, we're actually going to start knocking doors for this candidate if you don't give us what we want. Like, we're going to primary you, and we're gonna run our own candidates if you're not giving us the answers we want to hear and getting to the results we want. So I think there was a real fusion and a real marriage of the advocates world and the elected officials world. And I think a lot of the other elected officials saw what happened to the state senator, and they were like, I guess we got to start coming out with this community grid, because people are going to primary us if we don't,
Yeah, Joe, and here I think we kind of need that, just like that union between like our advocacy and our elected officials. But to go back to the community grid, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What are the benefits that you saw, and that you, I guess, like you think you would see with distributing traffic like along the community bridge? This is like distributing traffic through like regular communities instead of the highway. Is this what you're saying?
Yeah. So an important thing I have to add, a piece of context I didn't give. So there's, I said, 81 runs from the south, just south of the city, to just north of the city. Mm-hmm. And there's another highway, 481, that they're fusing 81 and 481 at the southern and northern points where they intersect. And so now some of that traffic, if you're coming from Canada and you're going further south in Syracuse and you're not stopping in the city, you'll be able to take that route of 481. So they provided an alternative. And so what that means is, the North Star for me on all this project is the stuff I told you guys about, the rates of asthma and the rates of heart disease. So, diesel trucks and 16-wheelers and stuff, they account for about 7% of highway traffic, but they account for 30% of the pollutants and toxins that create respiratory problems and health problems. So they account for a large portion of the environmental harm that's done. Very hopeful that when this is over, at least the environmental justice aspects will be addressed. That will, the projections right now see about a 30% reduction in air pollution in that corridor. So that to me is like the best outcome from all of this. A lot of the other stuff is like still stuff that we're going to have to keep fighting for. There will be 15 acres of land that's currently unused that's going to be coming back online. The fate of that is still undecided, so we keep talking to the state about trying to make sure the city gets access to that we can do some affordable housing, that we can do some economic development, and particularly economic development. We've written a lot of grants that really are trying to look at entrepreneurs, particularly folks of color from that area that were disenfranchised by the original project, to get a foothold in some of the economic development that's to come. So it provides us, as far as the environmental justice, that's the sure thing, and that's the thing I'm most excited about, that, we've won that war. But the battle for, what will the housing look like? Will we be able to stop displacement? We see like a huge economic opportunity. If you guys have been up to visit Rochester and they're in their loop, they saw about $300 million of new investment in that corridor. And so we're hoping for similar types of investment in Syracuse, but that's always a double-edged sword where you want to make sure that the economic prosperity is actually helping the folks that live in that corridor, that it's not just an act of gentrification and displacement, but we see a opportunity coming, and definitely the environmental improvement is something that at least keeps me moving and keeps me happy about the project.
This makes me very encouraged and happy to hear. Ms. Grant, you have a question?
Yeah, well, a question, a comment. I know that Buffalo talk about removal started along the same time that Syracuse did in the early 2000. And I know that we had houses removed, about 600, the same as Syracuse, and we had businesses that we lost. And coming back, I see, and I could be wrong, but I see there have been more involvement in people in Syracuse around their project than we have currently here in Buffalo. What can we do in Buffalo to bring the people on board, especially those who live near Humboldt Parkway, and the neighborhood has been devastated and have been hurt by the expressway coming in? What kind of community outreach engagement we can use here in Buffalo to have people, we're fighting for them, but sometimes you need to fight for yourself. So what can we do in Buffalo to encourage people to come out and take ownership of this project that's going to affect their health and their well-being?
Yeah, and I think you just perfectly identified one of the biggest challenges at the heart of all these efforts. Because you have folks that, like in Syracuse, I'm sure it's similar in Buffalo, folks who organized against the first time, the original construction, and their voices weren't heard. So trying to get enthusiasm and excitement among people that they'll be listened to this time is a big challenge. What Lanesta and I did, both NYCLU and the Community for the Grid, were, we developed very simple postcard size advocacy letters. So basically, on one side of the card, we would explain to people in the most simple terms possible why it was in their best interest to go with a community grid rather than a bigger and a wider viaduct. And then on the back, we would get them to sign, tell your representative that this is this is the option you want. Because a lot of times people think that, council people and state representatives get, 5,000 emails a day. They don't. If they get 1,000 emails from the neighborhood, or 1,000 postcards, or whatever the case may be, if you can get knock on doors, explain it to people, get these cards filled out, and drop them off at the elected officials' houses, they're gonna remember it. They're gonna know it. They're gonna know people are watching. And so that was kind of our main strategy, was like, let's get these postcards filled out. Let's show up with 1,000 postcards or 2,000 postcards. I think Lanessa's organization had 5,000 at the end of the day. NYCU working around the clock, just knocking on every door and getting people to sign up and say that they supported this. So getting it in a written document of some kind of outreach, I think is the most concrete way to put one foot in front of the other and try to get some motion on a project.
Yeah, we did a lot of that in the very beginning, and I think that we sort of have gotten away from it in the legal struggle and just trying to keep up with this new Queen City forward and making sure that we are present there. But I do think that, as the long winter breaks and spring is upon us, it's time for us to get back out in these streets and get on doors and reprioritize, making sure that folks are contacting their representatives, that we are having phone banks, that we are having postcard campaigns so that people have an actionable item. We've been doing a lot to educate people, and now we need to move into action.
Yeah. And Joe.
Yeah. Well, I think it's. Oh yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. So we're hearing a lot about people having this kind of conception that the decision is already made with what's going to happen with the highway, but and these listening sessions that are taking place are more of a formality. What do you think about that? Was this something that you guys experienced in Syracuse as well?
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to know. The state was the one who made the decision, so it's hard to say, what was it? Lanessa and I were just on a panel last week, and we were talking about the factors. And, to me, I'm like, was it the fact that the community grid option cost $800 million less? Was it the fact that it cost, that it was 2 years less of construction? Mm-hmm. Or was it, and Lanessa was kind of like, no, it was the power of the people, and so it's tough to gauge. But I think when they had those listening sessions, you mentioned you guys are live streaming on Facebook and posting the stuff to social media. I think that's where our power is at. Every individual going there to when they have these listening sessions and just packing the hall. And everybody live streaming, and everybody, everybody posted it to all their socials, and really trying to generate momentum on those movements. I don't know if that's what did it in Syracuse, but definitely that was something that we did. We made sure anytime they had a public hearing that we had folks that had asthma, folks that live 7 feet from the viaduct. Were in the house to let people know what they felt, what they and a lot of those emotional hearings and testimonies. I think, I don't know if they were the one that made it happen, but they definitely had a huge impact on public opinion at that time.
See.
And I think that that's key. We had a separate talk back because the listening sessions that are being held right now by the Department of Transportation is sort of like a science fair. There's posters and there's someone standing next to the poster. You can put a sticker on it if you want to, but there's not an opportunity for testimony and dialogue. So what we did was we had a community listening session where we allowed people to come in and tell their stories, and overwhelmingly people were concerned about the health of their families, the health of their children, the health of the elders in their family. So and their neighbors, and we know that health outcomes in the neighborhood surrounding Humboldt Parkway, where I live, are some of the worst in the nation. So we really want to make sure that we get the message across that. Convenience is cool, and the economic impacts are fine also. But we want to live. We want to breathe clean air. We want our children to have green space to play and enjoy themselves too. So. We're just coming up on about 5 minutes left. I want to give you the last word, Joe, and then we're going to close us out.
Oh, great. Well, I guess that's it. From what you're saying, from being on both sides, from being an advocate and then being frustrated enough as an advocate to be on the other side. What led me as an elected official was that pressure from the advocates and the outside. So. Just to anyone who's involved in your movement, I know you guys, you folks on the show already know this, but I guess my message would be to all the folks that are fighting for this or care about this, your voices matter. Your voices are important. It takes just a few dedicated people. I think it's Margaret Mead quote that never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does. And so just to the folks that are living close to Olmsted and this highway project in Buffalo, I know a lot of folks, it's easy to feel like you don't have agency because so often in the past, government has not listened to the people. But without that fight, without trying, when we were fighting, I'd always said, if you fight as hard as you can, they still may not listen to you. But definitely if you don't fight as hard as you can, they won't. So
that's right.
I hope that you guys, I'm very inspired. I've been keeping an eye on the Buffalo movement. You guys are definitely hugely inspiring, and I'm just sending all my prayer vibe and advocate vibes to you guys up there, and hope that you guys win the day sometime soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon, talking through some strategy. And have a wonderful day. So while we're talking about action items, Eddie, what is it something that the listeners can do right now today if they want to move into action?
Yeah, so if you're listening and you want to see a restored parkway and the east side of Buffalo revitalized, you could leave a comment for the scope of the project at queencitycomment.com. And this is like a way to submit like a digital comment. Just tell them to prioritize the health of the community and just you want to see a restored parkway. And like Joe said, your voices matter, and we want to see as many comments as possible. Thank you.
That's right. So leave your comments. Follow us on social medias. And the last thing that I'll say is that our volunteers put a lot of work into making this happen to bring you information. So if you can, please visit Eastside Parkways Coalition.com and drop us a few bucks so we can stay on the air. And have a great rest of your weekend. Peace out.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.